All right, 8th grade, let's take some notes here on the relationships that you could find in an ecosystem, like in a food web or a food chain. All right, so let's first look at our paper that has this energy pyramid on it. And we're going to take some notes about the different kinds of organisms that you could find in the energy pyramid. Okay, so first one is a scavenger. Okay, a scavenger is an organism that feeds on dead organisms. An example would be a vulture. Okay, it is not breaking down the organism, it's just eating a dead organism that it happens to find. All right, if you ever see vultures or buzzards on the side of the road eating a dead animal that got run over, that's a scavenger. Okay, the next one, decomposers. Decomposers are organisms that break down organic material. Examples are fungi and mushrooms. Okay, this is when something dies and it falls on the ground. The bacteria, the fungi, the mushrooms, the maggots, anything that are breaking it down into organic, back into soil, basically, are decomposers. Okay, it's a little different than a scavenger. All right. In the next box, a herbivore is a plant eater, like a deer, a mouse, a cow. It's any organism that eats only plants. In fact, it's going to have a digestive system that can only handle breaking down plants, like its teeth and its stomach. All right. The next one is a carnivore. A carnivore is a meat or a flesh eater. Those are animals that only eat meats, okay, like wolves, bobcats, coyotes, animals that only eat meat. All right, and then the next one is an omnivore. An omnivore eats plants and animals. You are a great example of an omnivore. You eat both plants and animals. Your teeth are designed for eating both plants and animals, and your digestive system too. All right, let's look at the next box. Okay, what's an autotroph? Okay, an autotroph is an organism that is capable of synthesizing or making its own food. The example of this is plants. Now, I know you're going to say, well, I can go in the kitchen and make myself a sandwich, but you're not an autotroph. You don't stand out in the sunlight and get energy from the sun. Okay, that's a plant. So a plant is an autotroph, an organism that makes its own food. All right, it'd be cool if we could do that, but we can't. All right, now a heterotroph is an organism that has to obtain or eat its own food from other sources. Okay, example are animals. You're a heterotroph. You have to obtain or get your food. Okay. All right, and then of course plants or autotrophs get their energy from the sun. All right, on the next side of your paper, we have an energy pyramid. Okay, so what the heck is an energy pyramid? An energy pyramid is a model that represents the flow of energy in a food chain or a food web. Okay, and if you notice over here on the food, the energy pyramid, see how it shows energy is flowing from the bottom to the top? Okay, usually we think of things flowing from up to down, but in an energy pyramid, we start on the bottom, okay? And let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, on the bottom of your energy pyramid are producers. Okay, so go ahead and write producers down there. Producers produce food for the rest of the energy pyramid. See, so what kind of organisms produce the food? Okay, autotrophs, plants. Okay, plants are producers. They take energy from the sun and they turn it into food that can be eaten or obtained by other organisms. Okay, so producers are at the bottom of the energy pyramid. All right, the next level are primary consumers. Okay, what kind of organisms are primary consumers? Well, think about it. What's below them? Producers, plants. So what eats plants? Okay, those would be herbivores. The examples we have here are a mouse and some deer. They eat plants. Okay, so draw yourself a picture of some herbivores there with your primary consumers. Okay, the next level above them is called secondary consumers. Look below the secondary consumers. What do you think they eat? That's right, they eat primary consumers. Okay, an example of that may be like a snake that eats the mouse. Okay, so a secondary consumer is one that eats a primary consumer. It's also going to be a carnivore. Could possibly be an omnivore, but most of the time it's a carnivore that eats one of the primary consumers, like this snake. So draw a picture there of an animal that's a secondary consumer. All right, now we're getting up here to the top level, and this level is called, it's a funny word, but it's tertiary consumer. And tertiary actually just means third, just like secondary means second, tertiary means third. So what's on this third level of consumer? Okay, well, look below tertiary to secondary, something that could eat a snake, all right, like a hawk. All right, so a tertiary consumer eats the secondary consumers. So you can see even the tertiary consumer ultimately gets its energy from the sun, because the tertiary consumer eats a secondary consumer, which eats a primary consumer, which eats the producers. And all that energy from the producers came from the sun. It flows up the energy pyramid. All right, let's turn the page, please. We're going to talk about symbiosis. All right, symbiosis refers to a close and prolonged interaction between organisms of different species. Okay, what the heck does that mean? It's like two people living together. One of them usually does the dishes and everything in the house, and the other one mows the yard and does the things outside. They both benefit each other. All right. Let's take a look at the first one here, the 3 types of relationships. Oh, wait, or what it means. Okay, it means 2 organisms that live together and at least one benefits. Okay, not always one benefits. Not always both of the organisms benefits. Sometimes it's just one of them. All right. So let's take a look at 3 types of these relationships. All right. And the first one is called mutualism. All right. In mutualism, both organisms are happy about the relationship. Okay. Both organisms benefit from it. An example might be like the little lichens that grow on trees. I don't know, sometimes you look at the trunk of a tree and the bark, it's got this little gray stuff, flaky stuff growing on it. All right, that's a lichen, and it's a combination of a fungus and an algae. Okay, the algae gets energy from the sun and produces food, and then the fungus uses part of that food, but the fungus decomposes the bark of the tree to get nutrients that the algae can use. So they're both happy about this relationship. Okay, if both organisms benefit, they're happy, like the 2 smiley faces here, then it's mutualism. Go ahead and draw in your smiley faces and fill in the rest of the blanks. All right. The next one is called commensalism. All right. In commensalism, one organism is happy and the other organism is kind of meh, doesn't really get affected by it. It's just there. Okay, so one organism benefits and the other one is unaffected. That's why we have the happy face for organism 1 and the meh face for organism 2. All right. This is an example of this is a lot of whales have these little organisms that live on their skin called barnacles, and the barnacles are filter feeders. So all they're doing is filtering plankton and things out of the seawater as the whale swims around the ocean. The barnacles don't really affect the whale. They just live on the skin. Doesn't harm it. They just are stuck on there. And the barnacle benefits by getting, fresh, new seawater to filter plankton out of every time the whale moves around. Okay, so that's an example of commensalism. Now the third type you're probably more familiar with. This one's called parasitism. The word comes from parasite. You've heard of a parasite. In this relationship, organism 1 is happy and organism 2 is very unhappy. Okay. Organism 1 benefits and the other organism is harmed. Okay. Examples of this, your pets. Your pets get affected by fleas and ticks. They're parasites. A flea or a tick bites into your dog and eats the blood from the animal. So that harms the animal. It's irritating. If they get enough fleas on them, it can make them sick or even kill them. Okay. Another example of parasitism, like that your dogs often get, are like worms in their intestines, like tapeworms. Okay. The worms are taking food directly from the organism's intestines, so the organism is not getting all of its food that it eats into its body. Okay, and that's it for your notes.